Good evening. I'd like to call the Airdrie City Council Budget Committee to order for March the 20th. Item number 2 is minutes. Everybody had a chance to review them. Any additions, subtractions? Being none, can I get a motion, please? Councillor, Chapman, in favor of adopting the minutes. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. We're on to 3, consent agenda. Any questions around 3.1, the fourth quarter cash and investment summary, investment portfolio? Questions from council? I think I had one. Sorry, Pelkey. Was around the estimates for the? Oh, maybe that's not the right one. I highlighted the following summary of actual interest earned compared to budget estimate was off, but I think you answered that question, so I'm okay with that. Any other questions? Okay, there being none, can I get a motion, please, for item 3.1? Thank you. Councillor Haig, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Agenda reports, item number 4. I'm not sure who's presenting, Pelkey or Lucy, but please, whenever you're ready. Yeah, we are live streamed, yep.
Good evening, Mayor Brown and Council Budget Committee members. The quarter 4 results for 2016 are showing a surplus of $2.8 million, which is minimal and is at 2.26% compared to the 2016 operating budget. At the end of Q3, our surplus projected was $1.4 million. Some of the surplus increase has been due to the greater franchise fee revenues received in 2016. There was also a one-time gain on investments for $437,000. Vacation accrual ended up $254,000 to the good. AMSQ dividend was declared for $550,000. And there was some snow and ice budget savings additional for $78,000. So overall, the decline in revenue streams at the end of the year, which you've also seen at end of quarter 2 and quarter 3, are the decreased interest revenue of $195,000. Development revenue for 2016 was as per projections and was short $710,000 in total for building inspections, planning, and engineering. Genesis Place revenues were almost on budget. Even though the past sales were under budget by $433,000, field ice rentals and aquatics registration of a total of $372,000 made up the gap. Overall, Genesis Place came in $285,000 under budget due to savings in personal costs, utilities, etc. Overall, transit came in $103,000 over budget, which is consistent with our third quarter projections. Some of the excess revenues for 2016 were a gain on one sale of investment for $437,000. The receipt of $151,000 as WCB Alberta surplus was received, as well as higher police fines revenue for a net of $375,000 for the Watches and the Safe City program that was implemented in 2016. Now on to expenses. Fleet came in with lower fuel expenses by $108,000 at the end of the year. Roads had savings in contracted services and materials for winter operations based on the mild weather conditions of $278,000. Plus, we saw lower power consumption for traffic signals and street lights for $197,000. Overall, we saw savings in personnel costs of $1.15 million out of a $49.6 million budget. This is $187,000 higher than what we had projected at the end of the third quarter. Also, this includes some of the frozen positions and the delay of the compensation model for 2016. Overall, we've also seen some less power consumption due to a lower rate negotiated than budget. So moving on to the operating carryforwards. The opening balance in the carryforward reserve in the beginning of the year was at $1.3 million, of which $490,000 is being carried forward to 2017. $1.4 million of 2016 unfinished projects are being carried forward to 2017, a list of which is in your attachment number 3 of your package. So our total carryforwards for 2016 into 17 is $1,881,200. Moving on to part 2. Water, sewer, and waste has seen increased contribution to reserves due to higher revenues and lower expenses than budget. This was due to a combination of better leakage detection, resulting in higher billable water consumption and billable sewer charges. We've also seen decreased purchases of water from the City of Calgary due to the slower growth rate that has been anticipated, as well as lower sewer charges from the City of Calgary. The slower growth rate was also a contributing factor to the reduced waste and recycling expenses. Part 3, capital. The total approved 2016 capital budget is at $99.5 million as at December 31st, 2016, of which $37.5 million have been spent. Some of the completed capital projects are up on the screen here. Overall capital project savings recognized at the end of 2016 were approximately $2.7 million. Some of the major capital projects that have been carried forward have been listed on the slide. $58 million worth of capital projects are being carried forward into 2017. So going into the alternatives for a surplus transfer, again, these are preliminary results and will be confirmed once an audit has been completed. The first alternative would be to split 50-50 as per our current reserve policy, half of it going into general operating reserve and half going to the general capital reserve. We also have an alternative 2, which is putting some monies aside into the tax stabilization reserve, the one-time revenue, some extraordinary revenues, or unused budget. So we've added up the one-time gain on the sale of investment, plus the WCB surplus that we've received, as well as the $100,000 that we had budgeted for the Winter Games aside for a future budget year, which amounts to $688,400. And then remaining surplus to be split 50-50 into the operating reserve and the capital reserve. So then we have the staff recommendation, accepts the 2016 fourth quarter budget update preliminary for information, and recommends to Council to approve the transfer of $688,400 to the tax stabilization reserve and the remaining surplus split 50-50. We will be coming forward in the April 18th meeting with the audited financial statements and a confirmed transfer to reserve schedule.
Excellent. Thank you, Pelkey. Questions?
So have some final comments from Lucy.
Oh, apologies. Go ahead.
No, that's all right. If I can, just a couple of things that we wanted to end with from a summary perspective of the whole year. Pretty well, a challenging budget for us to administer through 2016 with that economic downturn that happened very early in the year in January. We took a lot of very careful steps through the year to make sure we could try to mitigate any of the risk out there for a potential deficit. We did make estimates at the onset of the year around where we saw the revenue declines, and that was mainly around our development revenue, and our early estimates were around that $700,000 to $1 million that we could be out, and that did materialize, and we're very thankful that in other areas we were able to make up those shortfalls out there. we did, and as we reported at second and third quarter, there was other revenues that really became clear that they're a bit volatile as well. And that's where you're seeing those declines in revenues for Genesis Place, for annual pass sales, and also things like transit. So just a bit of an eye-opener for us, and just we were more careful, or took that into consideration as we budgeted for 2018, and I think we should also take that in consideration as we continue to budget for those areas as well. Other pieces of volatile revenue out there. So we've, because council has, this committee has established that tax stabilization reserve a couple of years ago, we did take that opportunity again to take those type of one-time revenues that are typical to go into such a reserve, and have come up with that alternative to actually again direct for the end of 2016 some dollars into that reserve. Halki and I and a whole lot of other staff continue to work on the fiscal framework, where we're updating our policies such as reserve, and also bringing that in line under the umbrella of the whole framework. So we'll keep working on that, and get some drafts to this table into the future as well. But we didn't want to forego that opportunity with the surplus that's there and the one-time revenues that we saw in 2016 to keep building on that tax stabilization reserve as well. So we just leave you with those comments.
Excellent, thank you, Lucy. Councillor Haig.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question on the WCB surplus. Is that part of the rebate that the city gets because we did so well in terms of safety and not using WCB?
Through the chair, it's in addition to the rebate. So we got an excess of $151,000 as a surplus distribution from the WCB.
For the Worship.
Yes, please.
So that includes the rebate, or
No.
it's just on top of the rebate?
On top of the rebate.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Coulson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair, this is a big surplus. This is the largest one I've seen so far. So I'm just, if you could just let me know, for a city our size, what is the healthiest way to build those reserves? What type of percentage? Is this quite lower than you would see normally, or is this on par with what you'd like to see go into reserves at the end of the year?
Do you want to-
So through the chair, as far as is that the type of dollars that we want to see flow to the reserves, our surpluses at the end of any given year help our reserve situations. Is it the best way to plan for the levels that should be in those type of reserves, or from a best practice position should be what we strive for as far as minimums and maximums in those reserves? It's better to actually plan for that through your budgets. So through your annual process of having contributions go there, because typically speaking, this surplus, yes, it's grander and bigger than what we've seen, say, last year or the year before, but you can't guarantee that either. So it's much better to plan for that as we do our long-term planning, short and long-term planning, establish what we want to see as minimums in those reserves, maximums in those reserves, the parameters around what the dollars would be used for, and plan for it that way, as opposed to relying on surpluses at any given year.
Thank you. So through the chair, as far as where our reserves are sitting now, where are we at that minimum to maximum range? Are we somewhere in the middle? Are we lower, higher?
So through the chair, there, just for clarification, are you speaking specifically about our operating reserve and our general and our capital reserve, or all of them?
Well, I know that our capital's quite low. We hear that year over year from you, Lucy. I'm just trying to get a good picture, because it seems like this is a large surplus, and maybe there may be opportunities to say, not only put towards the 100,000 towards the summer games, perhaps we could put the full amount towards it, and then it's done moving forward into the next few budget years. So I'm just, that's sort of my line of questioning is it better now that we have a much larger surplus to separate it out, go back to our snow reserve, put some money into there that we chose
Sorry,
to take
because
out?
I know where you're going. Do we have the last 10 years? Because I think I asked for that, and we averaged around 1.8 million surplus. I can't recall, Pelkey, what the number was. I'm just trying to, for Councillor Coulson, because we've been averaging, this is a big number, 2.8, but we've had numbers over 2 million since I've been the mayor. And I'm certain that we've been averaging around 1.8 million, maybe not, I can't remember what the year prior was, but I hear what Councillor Coulson's saying about taking the money now and just using it. Yeah,
Your
sorry,
Worship.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm just trying to
So
get your
I
line of
don't
thing.
mean the entire.
No, for the,
entire
but for the
sum.
games.
I'm just saying
yeah.
for the games.
Yeah.
Perhaps back into the snow and ice removal. Some of
Yep.
those things that we deferred or that maybe not necessarily snow and ice removal, maybe we do look back again at staff wages and that, what do we call it? The compensation that we've been putting off. This may be the time to look at that so that we don't have to continuously budget for it moving forward.
So, sorry to interrupt, Lucy. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so just through the chair, that those are all options for this committee, for council. Generally, with our reserves, we follow, as far as administration and bringing it forward, we work with what's there in the existing policy. The existing policy on our operating reserve is out of date as well. You've heard us talk about, as far as best practice would be to have a minimum of 3 months worth of your operations out there, which, now that we're a much larger organization, that's much larger than what's currently written in that policy. And as well, you need to be looking at the type of risks that are in our community, just to make sure that we have some dollars available in case that we're faced with some kind of disaster in our community that requires us to act quickly and whatnot. So those are the premises around a general operating reserve. So having said that, what we're doing as administration is following what's in that existing policy about splitting into both the operating and the capital reserve. We do really fully believe in the whole tax stabilization, so we certainly can see beginning to build on that. Pelkey and I also had lots of discussions around the snow and ice reserve that's out there, and we are recognizing we ended the year with a good snow year. So there's some dollars in your fourth quarter that's contributing to that as well. So we were actually back and forth a number of times about, well, maybe that should be part of our recommendation to actually flow some of those dollars in there. And what we decided, since we have a snow and ice reserve policy sitting there already, we decided that, okay, we'll just leave that as is for now, knowing that we're looking at updating all of that reserve policy in total. And when we bring that back, we can have some discussions around, maybe it becomes one of our practices, our standard, that at any given year end, and if we have some dollars left in snow and ice, then that automatically goes to that snow and ice reserve. So that can help to build that. So that's kind of where we were along that lines. And yes, your surplus is at the end of the year, and it's up to council where you'd like to direct those dollars to. You also have the flexibility by allocating dollars into that tax stabilization to start to use those dollars if you'd like to be earmarking them to help with things like the winter games, for example.
Right.
Or to assist with any other of our pressures as even we plan 2019, for example.
Right.
Or the existing.
So I guess then with that train of thought, I would just think that particularly for the summer games or anything that we've put off for following years, that perhaps now is the time to just look back a minute and say, okay, is now the time to make those changes in those dollars so that we're not bringing the same dollars forward every year to either be deferred or to hurt taxpayers when we are bringing on libraries or fire halls or more police and that type of thing. That's really going to affect our budgets here.
Just a question for you. So we haven't deferred the games payment, I don't think, because it's not due till 18, 19, 20.
No, sorry, that was a poor choice of words, but I mean the other items
Yep,
that
so
have been
so
deferred.
have you got, so how do you want to move forward? What would you like to see?
I would like to see some debate on what
Okay.
I just brought up, if that
Okay.
has any.
Yeah, I have a
Has
question
evoked any
first,
thoughts?
before we go to the debate, if that's okay?
Sure.
Just for Pelkey, we're always way behind in capital. It's always, actual and what's actually spent. Sometimes it's due to weather, whatever, the timing, whatever. Do we ever execute on the penalties? Because I sign a lot of contracts, and oftentimes I'll phone down to engineering and say, this project was supposed to be done last month, and they'll say, well, they had a problem with this, or they didn't have staff. Do we ever execute on the penalty side of things, quantifiably? And if we don't, why wouldn't we enforce?
I-
When does the contract become enforceable, I guess? Because we're saying specifically that if you are not done by this date, these are the results of that action. And yet I've seen it over the years, and I always, what I get back is usually we've come to an agreement with the contractor. There was unmitigating circumstances or whatever, but I mean, why would we have those things in those contracts if we're not going to enforce them? In particular, some of the ones have been quite late. The twinning of 8th Street was one for sure, heading up from Yankee Valley, going south. So sorry, I'll let you answer the question, Palki. Thank you.
I wouldn't have that information on me right now, but we could come back with it in my Q1 update in May.
That would be
which
great.
is- Yes.
That would be great.
And we'll also do a major capital projects update in the month of May for Q1. So
Okay.
we'll come back with it.
And the last one, it's kind of in line with what Councillor Coulson was saying. So when you came up with the split, we just because of what we've seen for capital investment over the next 2 years in particular is skyrocketing. How did you come up with the formula really to say we need this much in tax stabilization and this is reasonable for the capital and operating reserves? And I know it was kind of touched on, but if you could just provide a little more detail, that'd be great. Thank you.
I guess as we looked at the $688,000 that we are recommending go to tax stabilization, generally speaking, for that type of reserve, you're earmarking certain types of revenue, and most definitely one-time revenues is what you would always typically flow into a reserve like that for tax stabilization. So your one-time revenues in this particular 2016 year, most definitely the one-time gain on investment. So this happens to us occasionally. I actually recall going back, I think maybe early on when I started, is we crystallized over $1 million worth of gains in 1 year. And that made up a big part of one of our significant surpluses that we had. We will do that on advice of our investors that we have that help us to manage city dollars, and sometimes it's very advantageous to sell one of our investments, and that's when you get these one-time gains like this. Those are definitely dollars that I feel should be used and spread out over coming years, because typically speaking, if we'd have held that investment, we would have made the 3% as we went along, and we're just getting all our money up in the one period of time when you sell that investment. So that's definitely a one-time type of revenue. Other types of one type of revenue is the surplus distribution that we've been seeing over the last few years from WCB. Not something that we budget for, not something that we expect, not something that'll be every year. I'm actually quite shocked. Their funds must be doing really well because they've distributed their surpluses many over the last
From
3
past
years.
history, yeah, really good, yeah.
Yes, but that is one-time funds as well. And then we also have the summer games was one piece that CBC specifically asked us to put away, and we've done that. So that's the reason behind the $688,000 that we're recommending goes to tax stabilization.
Okay, and last one was the third quarter projections on the gas franchise fees. That was off enormously. And I'm just curious if provincially the carbon tax and other things have impacted people's choices on to turn the heat up or get a blanket and go get a sweater on. If you think you're going to be forecasting the decrease next year, or what do you think? Because that's quite a bit off of where we thought we might be. Oh, I didn't even see you back there. Sorry, Shan. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Brown, members of the committee. We did take into account the carbon tax for 2017, so we are not anticipating that we will need further funds in 2017 for those expenditures.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, so if there's no questions further on the report, then we'll move into discussion around Councillor Coulson's request to think about looking at using this year's surplus rate for other purposes that we have either put off or we'd like to see financed going forward. Is that right?
Yes, Your Worship.
Thank you.
So for example, the summer games, we know regardless we have to fund them. So yes, we could put that money into tax stabilization and then just pull it out when the time comes. But for other things that we have completely deferred that we know we're going to have to play catch up with later, particularly the wage compensation for city staff. That's one of them. The snow and ice reserve, those types of things. I mean, I these conversations go differently every year between council and what we think are priorities and what we don't. So yes, we can put them into tax stabilization, but do we know that the future council is going to make that choice to invest in that again down the road? So I guess now is our chance if we find merit in investing in a different way or earmarking those dollars. Do we do that now, or do we wait and see what happens the next time we have to pull extra funds out, or we have a little bit larger of an ask year over year?
Okay. Councillor Haig.
Thank you, Worship. So I'm intrigued by that. I think that's an idea. I'm not prepared tonight to make, I think, any decisions, but quite possibly maybe if we look at staff bringing forward some recommendations of some of those things that could fit under the amount that we have before us and go from there.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Chapman, please.
Just to be clear here, we're talking about some summer games, but is it not the 2020
It's
winter games?
It's winter, yeah.
That's what I was, I'm looking at the report and it's,
Sorry.
was that $100,000 left over from the summer games that we had?
No.
The winter
Okay,
games through
that's
the
what I was.
It's a $300,000, 100 per year for
Yeah,
3
that's,
years.
yeah. I
Sorry,
understand,
I'm
but
just so used to saying summer games.
Well, yeah, no, but it says summer games in the report as well.
We apologize.
It does say summer games. That's where I was.
That's why you're used to it.
I was curious where this
You read it
$100,000
over the
was coming
weekend,
from
it
with
was
the
in your
summer
head.
games.
Okay, sorry,
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chapman, go ahead.
No. That's just what I wanted to bring up.
Okay, Councillor Bellick? You don't want to comment? All right. So I think, are then we, well, sorry, yeah, I'd just like to know what you think, but Councillor Burley, thank you.
Thank you,
Our
Worship.
Deputy Mayor, sorry.
It does seem like a large amount, 2.8 million, but when you look at it, it's only 2.26% of our operating budget. When you can get that close to your operating budget year over year and have it as a surplus side, that's a good thing. To me, that just shows well-managed and well-run. As far as the division, even if it goes into the general operating fund, it can be used later for that anyway, without sterilizing it as a separate entity. I like putting some in this tax stabilization fund out of this. I wouldn't mind seeing it a third, and a third myself. Because the tax stabilization is going to come into play probably within another 2 years, I think. That is going to be a big deal for that council.
Could be sooner. I'm kind of the same vein. I wrote down a third, but Councillor Chapman, please.
So, Your Worship, what I'm looking at right now is we've got basically 700,000 tax stabilization and just over $1 million each into the operating and capital reserves. That's the numbers I'm done here, right? Correct? 6 to 8, okay.
Okay, so we have two members of council that are intrigued. Councillor Bellick?
Yes, I was always thinking of a third and a third and a third. So that would be my advantage or my decision.
Okay, so how do you want to proceed? So we can table this and ask for more information from administration and come back with another option and include some of the options that maybe you and Councillor Haig were thinking about as possibilities, and look at redistributing the funds that are there. It seems to, and you know what? I say a third and a third of a third. I don't know what that means. As you know, I'm not an accountant. It just seems, I agree with you, Councillor Burley, that you know, growth is not going to be significant again this year. I think we're going to be okay, but I certainly don't see the big numbers like we've seen before, and that definitely impacts our budget bottom line. We know that for sure. So I'd like to see a little bit more money to go there, but if we can maybe get a little more specific for administration, it's kind of where what you'd like to see come back. Councillor Coulson, that'd be a great help.
I'm open to administration letting us know if they feel that, hang on a minute, maybe there's something a little different that we should do with this versus the split that we have now. Just knowing that you had those conversations already about the snow and ice reserve and that kind of thing. I guess I would just say that I'm open to that shifting a little bit if now that we've had this conversation, and if you feel that's the route you want to go, I wouldn't be surprised if you came back with something a little different when we actually have those audited numbers when they come back. So that would
Okay.
I'm fine to move forward. Would you rather us table until we have the?
Sorry, you know what? Sorry, Councillor Coulson, let's, City Manager would like to comment first, and then we'll ask that question. Go ahead, Paul.
Just through the chair, just in clarity, I think some of the intention there is some of the things that did not get passed in the 2017 budget were some of the items that you were looking at. So games is probably a good one, although it was delayed for a good reason. But things like compensation model, and I can't remember what other, we did reduce from snow and ice reserve, right? Okay.
Yep.
So we could bring a listing of those kinds of things and maybe some of our thoughts around each of those. I mean, I have compensation model is not an easy one. I'm kind of in between. Of course, you don't want to say no, but it is something that takes time to implement, and it may not be doable till next year anyways, and maybe it's better to put money aside in a tax stabilization knowing that something like that might come. But anyways, I get the intention. So,
Lucy?
Could we just add just one piece, and it's more from a year-end and administrative perspective, is that next time that we come to the table, our year-end will be here. And the treatment of the surplus is something that we need to work into those statements. So I guess for that particular need, if we can get some direction today from this committee on which way we want to go. Palki absolutely notes here that regardless of how we proceed with divvying up the surplus and putting it into different reserves, we can still continue this conversation. So maybe what I'm possibly suggesting that we just get a direction today on how to split the reserves for year-end purposes. We'll need to work that into our financial statements, and that's what you'll get back here at this table next time we come with and our
Sorry,
statements
Lucy,
need to be approved.
April council meeting will happen before the next CBC meeting, right?
The financial statements? The financial statements will come here on April 18th.
Okay.
And then they'll
Yeah.
also proceed to council for that endorsement. So the auditors will be here, year-end will be presented. They'll need to go to council for
Yeah, and
approval.
there's nothing to say that the CBC committee can't meet in May and say, okay, this is how we did it. We can change, amend, or do what we need to do if it includes some of the options, and your staff will provide that detail back. So do we need to include that in the motion, Sharon? Or are we okay to, if we're going to adopt it the way it's presented, but still receive feedback on the plans that Paul had mentioned, that Councillor Coulson mentioned, and other things that we deferred at the last go-around. How would we like to move on that? And I guess the next question is for the council. There was a mention of a third by myself and Councillor, or Deputy Mayor Burley. Was there any interest in that, or did you want to hold it to the same? Sharon, please, you go first.
If you're looking for very specific information to come back to council, then I would request a resolution.
Okay, so we'll make
Directing
two
that.
resolutions, and one to adopt, and the second one to ask for specifics. Okay, thank you.
So are you moving that, yours?
No, I'm not, but I wanted to get an answer to the question first. No, I know it's just being funny, but, sorry, Councillor Coulson.
Okay. So I understand it's a little too difficult to maybe have that whole philosophical discussion now. So, I mean, I've said what I had to say. So I'm fine. I'm fine with a third. I really do feel like maybe we should be putting money aside for the Winter Games, though, now out of that. But I don't want to make the motion because I'm thoroughly confused as to how to move forward.
Well, the nice part is that we have that option going forward. So next time CBCs, if you feel like the 300,000 you want to see come forward and the balance of the committee believes that, and we put it through to council, then I don't see why it can happen. Absolutely, 100%. Councillor Chapman, please.
Your Worship, thank you. Just doing some math. So if we went a third, and a third, would reduce the operating and the capital by 133,000, increase the tax stabilization by 233,000, or 266,000 roughly. I don't have an issue with a third, and if it comes time when we have to put money forward for those Winter Games, if it does come from operating from taxes, well, that's when we kick that tax stabilization in. You know, that next council can use that money for the games as part of the tax stabilization.
Okay.
That's what it was there for. I don't have an issue with a third and a third.
Councillor Bellick, you're okay?
Yes, I'm okay with that.
Okay, Councillor Haig?
Sure.
Okay, and actually, we're going to defer to you guys. What is it relevant? Does it make sense? Are you comfortable with that?
Through the chair, it solves all the problems. It does.
Sorry for laughing, Talkie. That's really quite very good. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you. Councillor Haig, please.
So if it solves all the problems, then that is a definite yes.
That's perfect. All right. Can I ask you to be the mover, please, of that particular motion, Councillor Haig? Are you okay?
So then I will move the motion as previously stated.
Perfect. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. And we need a Councillor Coulson, you need to make a motion, I believe.
I do believe that was it.
Sorry, the third was the motion. Yes, that's correct. But there was a second motion where we were going to ask specifically for staff to come back with some items that we deferred from last year that council may or may not want to approve in upcoming budget discussions.
I would move that if staff feel that they need a motion in order to come back.
Well, I think Sharon said that earlier.
Through the chair, where I was coming from was if you wanted staff to come back with that specific information so you could deal with it as individual items, then we'd need a resolution to do that. If you were just looking at those items as part of a budget process, then you wouldn't need to do that.
Okay, but sorry, but then we're making the assumption that administration will bring back those items with the resolution of a third, a third, a third?
You're looking for that information to come back prior to any budget process, is that correct? To act on perhaps in Q1?
Yes.
I mean Q2?
No, yeah, Q2, yeah.
Then, yes,
Please.
then we would need that resolution.
Okay, so that's what we need. Councillor Coulson, if you don't mind.
So moved, Your Worship.
Thank you. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies.
If I may, Your Worship?
Yes, you may.
If you could perhaps do accepting the fourth quarter budget for information, please.
Oh, absolutely.
I'll make that motion, Your Worship.
Thank you. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. And I'll just minimize my page. We have nothing on the committee of the whole, so CBC meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Shannon, Pelkey, and Lucy, thank you. Mark, thank you for looking stoic and handsome over there. Just always calming presence. I hope you're here in an hour from now. We're offline, right?